The man in the white coat was standing too close to the old man's foreback. That's what Zara noticed first. Not his face, not his voice, but the space between his hands and the clear plastic line that fed medicine into Mr. Whitmore's arm. Doctors didn't hover like that. They moved with purpose, checked charts, adjusted things quickly. This man was waiting, watching the hallway, his fingers trembling near the port. Zara was 11, small for her age, wearing her grandmother's hand-me-down cardigan that hung past her knees and sneakers held together with duct tape her uncle had applied in careful strips. She'd been sitting in the waiting area of Massachusetts General Hospital's cardiac unit for 3 hours, ever since her grandmother's neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who sometimes gave her soup, had brought her here after Grand's heart attack. The waiting room chairs were cracked vinyl that stuck to her legs. She'd counted ceiling tiles, watched nurses pass, memorized the pattern of who belonged and who didn't. The man in room 412 didn't belong. She stood up slowly, keeping her eyes on him through the window. He wore the right clothes, white coat, stethoscope, hospital badge clipped to his pocket. But the badge was flipped backward. She could see the blank white back of it instead of the photo side. And his shoes were wrong. Black dress shoes, shiny and new. The doctors here wore clogs or running shoes, the kind you could stand in for 12 hours. She'd noticed that about everyone. You learn to notice everything when you spent years moving between shelters and doubled-up apartments, reading adults for danger signs, calculating which ones would help and which ones to avoid. This man was wrong in ways she couldn't fully name. The wrongness was in his shoulders, hunched and tense, in how he kept glancing at the door, in the way he'd checked the same 4 bag 3 times in 5 minutes without writing anything down. Mr. Whitmore, she'd heard nurses say his name, was asleep in the bed, gray-haired and fragile-looking, oxygen tubes at his nose, monitors beeping steadily. The television above his bed played soundless news. He was alone. No family in the chairs. No one watching. Zara's throat felt tight. She walked to the nurse's station, where a young woman with kind eyes was typing into a computer. "Excuse me," Zara said quietly. The nurse didn't look up. "Honey, if you need the bathroom, it's down the hall on the left. There's a doctor in room 412. I think something's wrong." That got her attention. The nurse, her badge said Jennifer Park, RN, turned. "Wrong how? He's been touching the 4-back. A lot. But not fixing anything. Just touching it. And his badge is backward." Jennifer's expression shifted from patient to alert. "Stay here." She stood, moved quickly but not frantically, disappearing down the hallway toward 412. Zara watched through the glass as Jennifer entered the room. The man in the white coat turned, smiled, said something. Jennifer pointed at the 4, asked a question. The man's smile didn't change, but his hand moved toward his pocket. Not his badge pocket, his pants pocket. And Jennifer's body language changed instantly. She stepped backward, spoke sharply. The man ran. He burst past Jennifer, knocking her into the doorframe, and sprinted toward the stairwell, white coat flying behind him. 2 security guards who'd been near the elevators moved to intercept, but he was fast, desperate, already slamming through the stairwell door before they could reach him. One guard followed. The other grabbed his radio. Within 90 seconds, hospital security had locked down the floor. Within 4 minutes, Boston police arrived. 2 officers first, then 4 more, then detectives in suits and serious faces. They questioned Jennifer, examined the 4-bag with gloved hands, took photographs. They evacuated Mr. Whitmore to another room, nurses surrounding him with careful urgency. And then they came for Zara. "You're the girl who reported it?" The detective was a tall black woman with graying temples and a voice like Zara's. Grandmother, firm but not mean. Her badge read Detective Sarah Mills. She crouched down to eye level, which most adults didn't do. "Jennifer says you saw something. Can you tell me exactly what you noticed?" Zara explained about the hovering, the backward badge, the shoes, the nervous checking. Detective Mills listened without interrupting, writing in a small notebook, her pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. "How long were you watching him?" "Maybe 5 minutes. But I'd seen him walk past the waiting room before that, like 20 minutes earlier. He went to the break room, then came back. He was looking at room numbers, like he was trying to find the right one." "You're very observant," Detective Mills said. Something in her tone made Zara's chest feel warm and tight at the same time. "What's your name?" "Zara. Zara Okoye." "Zara, I need you to stay here a bit longer. Is that okay? Is someone here with you? My grandmother. She had a heart attack. She's in the ICU. Detective Mills' expression softened. I'll make sure someone checks on her for you. But right now, you might have just saved that man's life. The man they caught 40 minutes later wasn't a doctor. His name was Aaron Voss, 29, former pharmaceutical sales representative fired 6 months earlier from Whitmore Medical Solutions, the company founded by Richard Whitmore, the elderly man in room 412. The white coat was ordered online. The stethoscope was his father's. The badge was a forgery, printed at a FedEx and laminated, good enough to pass a casual glance. The four-bag was the key evidence. Crime scene investigators found it had been tampered with. The port opened. Something added to the saline solution. The lab would later confirm potassium chloride in concentrations that would have caused cardiac arrest within hours. Untraceable if it worked. Natural causes if no one looked too close. Richard Whitmore, already recovering from coronary surgery, would have simply appeared to decline. These things happened. Hearts failed. Except Zara had been watching. Detective Mills explained this 3 hours later, sitting with Zara in a private consultation room while her grandmother slept one floor up, stable now, out of immediate danger. They brought Zara hot chocolate from the cafeteria and a sandwich she was too nervous to eat. He was going to kill him? Zara asked. Her voice sounded smaller than she wanted. We believe so. Mr. Whitmore fired him last year after discovering he'd been falsifying sales reports. Aaron lost his license, his career, his house. He blamed Mr. Whitmore for everything. Detective Mills set down her coffee. He'd been planning this for months. Studied the hospital, learned the shift changes, waited for a day when Mr. Whitmore's family wasn't visiting. If you hadn't noticed him, if you hadn't said something, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Zara's hands were shaking around the paper cup. I just thought something looked wrong. That instinct, that awareness, most people don't have it. Or they ignore it. You trusted what you saw, and you acted. That takes courage. I was scared, Zara admitted. I thought maybe I was wrong. That everyone would be mad at me for bothering them. But you spoke up anyway. That's what courage is. Richard Whitmore wanted to meet her. Detective Mills explained this carefully, making sure Zara understood she didn't have to, that no one would be upset if she wanted to go home. But Zara's grandmother was still sleeping, and the nurses said visiting hours in ICU were limited anyway, and something in Zara wanted to see him. Needed to know he was real, that saving him had meant something. They went together, Detective Mills and Zara, taking the elevator down to the private recovery wing where Richard had been moved after the police cleared his original room. 2 officers stood outside. Inside, Richard Whitmore sat propped against pillows, looking less gray than before, his daughter beside him, a woman in her 40s with her father's sharp eyes and expensive suit. This is Zara, Detective Mills said. The young lady who noticed something was wrong. Richard's hand trembled as he extended it. Zara shook it carefully, aware of the force still attached, the monitors still beeping. My daughter tells me you saved my life, he said. His voice was soft, scraped thin by age and illness. Is that true? I just told the nurse, Zara said. She's the one who stopped him. Jennifer told us what you reported, Richard's daughter said. Details no one else caught. If you hadn't been paying attention, if you'd assumed he belonged there. She stopped, emotional. Thank you. That feels inadequate, but thank you. They talked for 15 minutes. Zara explained about waiting for her grandmother, about learning to watch people, about the specific wrongness she'd sensed. Richard listened with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she wasn't used to, not pitted, not dismissed, but genuinely heard. Where do you live, Zara? He asked finally. With my grandmother. In Dorchester. When she's okay. I mean, when she's not. Zara hesitated. I don't know yet. Maybe my uncle. Or maybe Children's Services. Graham's been sick a lot lately. Richard and his daughter exchanged a look. How's your grandmother doing? The doctors updated us since we're both patients here. Better, they said. But she needs surgery. On her heart. And she doesn't have the insurance for it. She kept putting it off because it's too expensive. Zara's throat felt tight. That's why it got so bad. What's her name? Margaret Okoye. Richard wrote it down on the notepad beside his bed. His daughter was already typing into her phone. Zara, Richard said. I can't repay what you did. There's no currency for saving someone's life. But I can make sure your grandmother gets the care she needs. The surgery, the recovery, whatever it takes. And I can make sure you're both stable afterward. Would that be acceptable? Zara stared at him. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You noticed a threat no one else saw because you've learned to be observant, to protect yourself. That skill, that awareness, saved me. The least I can do is make sure you and your grandmother have some security. Some peace. Margaret Okoye had her surgery 2 weeks later. The cardiac surgeon was the best in Boston. Richard Whitmore had made calls, applied pressure the way wealthy men could. The hospital administrators who'd been stalling suddenly found operating room time available. The billing department mysteriously marked the procedure as covered by a grant from the Whitmore Foundation. Margaret came through perfectly, recovery textbook smooth. Zara spent those weeks between the hospital and a temporary foster placement that Richard's attorney had quietly arranged. Not the system's usual shuffle, but a vetted home with a woman named Paula who fostered specifically for medical cases, children whose parents were hospitalized. Paula's house smelled like bread and had a room with actual books. Zara was allowed to visit Margaret every day. You saved that man's life, Margaret said one afternoon, holding Zara's hand across the hospital blanket. Her voice was stronger now, color returning to her dark skin. Baby girl, you saved him and he's making sure we're okay. That's grace. That's what grace looks like. But it was more than the surgery. Richard Whitmore, it turned out, didn't do anything halfway. His daughter, Catherine, appeared at the hospital 3 days after Margaret's operation with a folder full of papers. My father wants to set up a trust, Catherine explained, sitting in the ICU waiting room with Margaret and Zara. She was elegant even in casual clothes, her voice businesslike but warm. Enough to cover your living expenses, medical costs, and Zara's education through college. We're also purchasing a small house in Roslindale, paid in full, under your name, so you won't have to worry about rent. Margaret started crying. Zara had never seen her grandmother cry. Why would he do this? Margaret whispered. Because Zara saw something everyone else missed. She trusted her instincts despite being a child in an adult space. Despite knowing she might be dismissed or ignored. She acted anyway. Catherine looked at Zara. My father believes that kind of character is rare. He wants to make sure you have every opportunity to develop it further. The house was small but real. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with working appliances, a yard with grass. They moved in during the first week of November, Margaret still recovering but stable. Zara helping unpack boxes of donated furniture and household goods that kept arriving. The Whitmore Foundation had apparently decided they were a project. On Thanksgiving, Richard himself visited. He walked slowly, his daughter supporting his elbow, but he walked. They sat in Margaret's new living room. Donated sofa, donated coffee table, everything clean and solid and theirs. And shared a meal Paula had helped Zara cook. How's school? Richard asked Zara. Good. Better now that we're stable. I can concentrate more. She'd started at a new school, closer to the house, where teachers were already noticing her sharp memory and careful attention to detail. Your grandmother tells me you're interested in medicine. Zara hesitated. Maybe. I like understanding how things work. How to tell when something's wrong. Those are good instincts for a doctor. Or a detective. Or a dozen other things. Richard set down his water glass carefully. Whatever you decide, the foundation will support you. College, medical school, whatever path you choose. I mean that literally. Catherine has it in writing. Why? Zara asked. The question had been building for weeks. You don't know me. I just told a nurse what I saw. That's not special. It's profoundly special, Richard said quietly. Most people see things that don't fit and rationalize them away. They assume someone else has noticed, that it's none of their business, that they might be wrong. You saw wrong and refused to ignore it. You understood that silence was complicity. At 11 years old, you had the moral clarity and courage to act. He paused. That saved my life. I won't forget it. Ever. Margaret squeezed Zara's hand. He's saying thank you, baby. Let him say. Thank you. So Zara did. She accepted the trust, the house, the promise of education. She accepted being noticed, being valued for something other than resilience or survival skills. It felt strange at first, like wearing someone else's clothes, but gradually it became real. Richard visited monthly, then weekly as he recovered strength. He became something like a grandfather, interested in Zara's schoolwork, her science projects, her observations about people and patterns. Catherine sent internship opportunities as Zara got older, connections to doctors and researchers, pathways toward futures that hadn't existed before. By the time Zara graduated high school, top of her class, acceptance letters from 6 universities including Harvard, Margaret's house had become a home filled with photographs and achievements and the quiet stability of safety. The trust had grown with careful investments. Zara's college tuition was secured. Her grandmother's health was managed with the best specialists Richard's connections could provide. At graduation, Richard sat in the audience beside Margaret, both older now but present. When Zara crossed the stage to accept the award for community service, given for her volunteer work teaching children in shelters about safety awareness, she looked into the crowd and found them. Her grandmother, her unlikely benefactor, the detective who'd listened, the people who'd believed a scared girl's observation mattered. That evening, at dinner, Richard raised his glass, water now, doctor's orders, and made a toast. To Zara, who saw what others missed and refused to stay silent. Who understood that protecting others requires courage, especially when you're small and scared and unsure. You saved my life. But more than that, you reminded me what matters: attention, action, the willingness to speak truth regardless of consequence. I was just watching, Zara said, embarrassed. You were bearing witness, Margaret corrected gently. And then you testified. That's everything. Years later, during medical school at Harvard, Zara would remember that day at Mass General. The wrongness she'd sensed, the choice to speak, the cascade of consequences that followed. She would remember that paying attention was a skill, that trusting yourself was courage, and that sometimes the smallest voice in the room carried the most critical message. She would become a doctor, specializing in emergency medicine, developing a reputation for catching details others missed, the subtle signs of sepsis, the early warnings of stroke, the patterns that indicated danger. She would teach medical students about observation and intuition and trusting their instincts. And she would tell them about a November afternoon when she was 11 years old, small and scared, and wearing her grandmother's cardigan, when she'd noticed a man in a white coat standing too close to an 4-bag and chosen to say something. That choice changed everything, she would say. For him, for me, for everyone. Because being observant means nothing without the courage to act on what you see. The students would nod and take notes, but Zara would know, would always know, that the lesson wasn't about medicine. It was about witness, about refusing to look away, about understanding that silence protects no one, and that speaking up, even when you're small, even when you're scared, even when you think no one will listen, sometimes that's the thing that saves lives. Sometimes that's the thing that saves your own.